Hey there, as you can tell from the title of this video, this story is not going to be a happy one. This is going to be my story about my miscarriage with my first pregnancy. So trigger warning, if you're sensitive to this topic, please stop watching now because I am going to be giving all the details of what I went through and how I felt and all of that stuff. I do just want to start by saying that I'm making this video for a couple of reasons. The first one is honestly it's just therapeutic to talk about it. I have talked about it a lot and it has made me feel better. It's been about 3 months since this happened, so I feel like I'm in a place where I can share my story now and maybe get through this without crying. But if I do cry, I'm human, so that's life. It happens. But I also wanted to make this video because maybe you're going through this, or you know someone who's going through this, or you already have gone through it, or you're scared you might go through it. So I want to give you this story, my experience, to maybe help you know what to expect, what could happen. Obviously, everybody's story is going to be completely different. So this is just going to be completely from my perspective and what happened to me. So I guess I'll just go ahead and get started from the beginning. So in January of 2020, my husband and I decided that we wanted to start trying for a baby starting in June. So in about March, we went to my OB and had what they call a family planning meeting. And basically we just went in to tell my doctor that we do want to start trying to have a baby. So we had the opportunity to ask her all sorts of questions, like about prenatal vitamins, about how long it should take to get pregnant, at what point should we be concerned if I'm not pregnant, all that kind of stuff. So I say all this to say that this was highly anticipated. We were very excited, and this was planned out, and we were really eager to start a family. So fortunately for us, I did get pregnant in June as we planned, which was amazing, and I just felt like on cloud nine that it happened so quickly. So I called my doctor immediately and I was like, I got a positive pregnancy test. I need to come in and confirm it. And they actually said, oh, no, like the pregnancy tests are so accurate. Congratulations, you're pregnant if you got a positive pregnancy test, and we'll see you at 8 weeks. So the period of waiting for your first appointment at 8 weeks, for me at least, it was exciting to know I was pregnant, but you have no way of knowing if everything is okay other than just kind of how you feel, which it didn't tell me that much, but I had a feeling that everything was fine. I thought it was all going to be fine, because why wouldn't it be? Obviously, I know that miscarriages can happen, but you just don't ever think that they're going to happen to you. So because this was COVID times, the doctor's office was allowing partners or spouses to come in only for ultrasounds, but for doctor's appointments or any other thing, you had to go by yourself. And of course, everybody had to wear a mask. So my 8-week appointment came, and my husband got to come for the ultrasound portion. And then afterwards, I was scheduled for a doctor's appointment, which was by myself. So during the ultrasound, I just remember that we held hands so tightly. I thought I was going to break his hand. I felt like I was almost holding my breath, and my heart was racing. I was so excited. And we saw the baby, and I remember it because I've been following along in some pregnancy apps, and I knew it had like little arm buds and stuff, and I just for some reason didn't think it was gonna look like a baby, but it did. It totally looked like a baby, and we saw that beautiful flutter of the heartbeat on the ultrasound, and it was just amazing. And then after that, my husband left, and I went to the doctor appointment portion by myself, and the doctor said that everything looked absolutely perfect, and that once you get to 8 weeks and you have an ultrasound and they confirm the heartbeat, that the miscarriage rate drops to about 5%. So to me, that was super reassuring, because 5%, there's obviously still a chance, but it's such a small chance. There's a 95% chance that everything's gonna be okay, and just the eternal optimist that I am, I just knew it was all gonna be fine. So my husband and I had a trip planned to Breckenridge, Colorado. We're taking a road trip since it's COVID times and we can't really fly, which, side story, that was really crazy to do a road trip while pregnant, because having to go to the bathroom every 30 minutes was such an ordeal. But anyways, while we were there, it is at elevation, and I currently live in Texas, so it was a pretty big jump for me. My husband's mom kind of got me worked up because she was saying, oh, it's not healthy to be at elevation, you're not getting enough oxygen. So I did freak out, and I had the on-call doctor call me, and of course they assured me that everything was fine. It was okay to be at elevation. I just needed to kind of take it easy. So I got a little bit worked up there, but then I was okay. And this was all at about 9 weeks. So then we got back from our trip. I had already started showing. I had a little bump there, and I gained some weight already. And at 10 weeks exactly, I had to go to my OB's office just for a non-pregnancy related reason. And I saw a nurse practitioner that day, and she told me that anytime I go into their office and I'm not getting an ultrasound, for whatever reason, they're going to do a Doppler to find the baby's heartbeat and confirm that there's a heartbeat. So I thought that was so cool because I hadn't actually heard the heartbeat yet. I'd seen it on the ultrasound, but I hadn't heard it. And it did take her a while to find it because I was 10 weeks, and she's like, you know, it's kind of early for the Doppler, so if we can't find it, don't worry, we'll just go and get an ultrasound real quick. But after about a couple of minutes of her searching, she did find it, and I just remember the heartbeat was so strong and so fast. It was in like the 160s or 170, I think it was 170s actually. And that was so reassuring because, okay, I'm at 10 weeks, and like I think once you get to 12 weeks, you're pretty safe. Of course, something can still happen, but the chances go down even that much more. So I just felt like I was so close. And I told my husband about it, and he was jealous because he couldn't be there to hear the heartbeat himself. And oh gosh, now I'm gonna get choked up a little bit. But everything seemed fine, and my next appointment scheduled was my 12-week appointment, and I also had an ultrasound and again a doctor's appointment that day. So at this appointment, we're also planning to do the genetic testing and all that to make sure everything's okay, and we would get to know the gender. So we had already, since the lab results are going to be available in about 2 weeks after this appointment, I had already planned a whole gender reveal party, invited all of my closest family and friends, and jumped through a million hoops to make sure that it was COVID safe and that everybody could come. And I rented a space, and we just had nothing but excitement. I'd already told all of my family and friends. I told them at 8 weeks because I was just so sure that everything was fine. But when my 12-week appointment came, we went into the ultrasound, and we held hands so tightly again, just like the first time. And the ultrasound tech was telling me that this was her favorite time to do ultrasounds because the baby's not too big yet, and so you can see the whole thing, and it looks like a baby. And so I was just really excited, but whenever she put on the ultrasound, things just didn't look quite right to me. I remember in the first ultrasound, there was a lot of movement, and I don't know if that was the baby moving or if it was just the ultrasound moving around a lot, but I remember there was a lot of movement, and this time, everything looked kind of still, and the baby didn't look like what the tech had been describing. It honestly didn't look that much different than the last ultrasound. But she went to the baby, and then she was quickly she maintained her happy attitude, but she was quickly like, okay, well, I need to check out some other things like your ovaries and stuff like that. So let me do that, and then I'll get back to the baby. So she just kind of kept talking to us like everything was fine. And once she finished taking pictures of everything else that she needed to, she went back to the baby, and she turned to us and said, "I'm sorry, I don't see a heartbeat." And I was so calm, and I just said, "I didn't either." And at that point, I knew what had happened. And my husband didn't even understand what we were talking about at the time. He didn't get it. And the tech said the baby was measuring at about 10 and a half weeks. So it was clearly no longer growing because I was actually about 12 and a half weeks at this time. So after that, I asked, like, can my husband please come with me to the doctor appointment, even though we have this COVID rule? And the tech was like, look, I don't know if I'm allowed to do this, but I'm definitely bringing him. So luckily that was fine. And I had watched some of these videos about miscarriages before. And so to me personally, I was kind of thankful for that because I felt like I knew what was going on. And in that period of waiting for the doctor to come into the room, I was kind of able to explain to my husband, like, look, this is a miscarriage and my body didn't recognize it. So I'm pretty sure this is what's called a missed miscarriage. And like, it's gonna have to come out. And I just remember telling him that, like, we were already talking about it, like, I just want to be pregnant again. Like, I wish that I was still pregnant right now. And so, yeah, we want to try again. I just want to be pregnant again. Sorry. And he was so confused, but I think I was just in such a state of shock that I wasn't even emotional at that point. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even, like, really upset. I mean, of course I was, but I wasn't really, like, my emotions weren't coming out. I was just taking in the information, processing it, and trying to be as logical as possible, like thinking about what needed to happen, what I needed to do. So the doctor came in and, of course, like, said her apologies and said that whenever this happens this far along, that there's usually something majorly wrong chromosomally or with a major organ system development, like the brain. And it was nothing I did. It wasn't my trip to Colorado or anything like that. They were very reassuring, but I was just in such an odd state that I think I even apologized to my doctor. Like, I think I said that, like, oh, I'm sure that this isn't your favorite part of your job either, so thank you for being so kind to us. Like, that was just the state I was in. I was so shocked. It didn't feel like real life. I don't even know how to explain it other than that. Like, I felt like a robot. It didn't feel like this was really what was happening to me, but it was. But my doctor told me that I was too far along for me to really comfortably do the next steps at home, because there are basically two options whenever you have a miscarriage. You can either take a pill to kind of induce everything to come out and the pregnancy to clear itself, or you can have surgery. So my doctor was worried about hemorrhaging with me and just that it wouldn't really be safe and comfortable to do at home. So she recommended that I get a D&C, which is the surgery, dilation and curettage, where basically they go in with a spoon-like thing and a suction device, and they scrape and vacuum everything out. And it's, I think it's a pretty minor surgery, but you are under full anesthesia. So she kind of explained the whole thing to me and said that this needed to happen as soon as possible. So that day was a Friday, and the soonest that they could schedule me was first thing Monday morning. So after the appointment, my doctor wanted me to get blood drawn at their office, and so I had to go and wait. There was a line of like a couple of people ahead of me, and that's when I kind of really broke down, when I just had that period to just wait there and sit with it. And when I came in to get my blood drawn, they did it, and I was just trying to hold it together, trying to not cry. And finally I had to sign a form to kind of, I think, authorize the lab test. And having the pen in my hand was just the weirdest feeling. Like, I didn't even know how to hold the pen, and my hand was shaking so much. I managed to scribble out like the first letter of my first name and the first letter of my last name in like a line. And the person was like, oh no, honey, that's not going to be good enough. We need a signature. And I just completely broke down crying, and I was like, I'm sorry, I can't do it. My hand's shaking so bad. I can't sign this paper. And so then I think she realized what had happened, and she's like, no, it's fine. It's okay. Like, this is okay. Don't worry about it. And they tried to like usher me out there. But at that point I had just broken down. I was disoriented. Like, I didn't know how to get out of the office. And then my husband was trying to help guide me because he realized that this was like a downward spiral really quickly. And so I got into the waiting room and there was a line of people and I didn't know where to go, but I was just bawling, crying. And so I think the front desk people realized that and they just took my checkout sheet from me and just ushered me out. And in the parking lot, I was hysterical for a few seconds. And since we didn't think my husband was going to be coming to part 2 of the appointment, I didn't want him to have to wait, so we had driven separately. So I still had to drive myself home, which I calmed down enough and I drove myself safely home. And when we got home, it was just like the weirdest feeling of just sadness and silence and emptiness. And then, since we had told everybody, the next few hours consisted of me just making phone call after phone call after phone call, telling everybody the news. And by the end of it, I felt so rehearsed, I could almost get through it without crying. But it was like each time I told the story again, I started crying all over again. But I will say that I don't regret at all telling people at 8 weeks. People say, don't tell anyone until 12 weeks. For me, I don't subscribe to that, because for me, I just feel like if anything bad were to happen, which it did, I wanted those same people in my life who love and care about me and support me to be there to support me in my time of like absolute pain and grief. And I think that it was so helpful to be surrounded by people who knew what I was going through and wanted to be there to help me. So I don't regret that at all. For me, it was so important to have that support system. That night, one of my good friends and one of my husband's good friends brought us food that lasted us through the whole weekend. And we got some other edible arrangements. People sent cookies, people sent flowers. And I have to tell you that if you know somebody going through this, bringing them food so that they don't have to worry about cooking or their next meal, you don't even have to think about that when you're in such pain, it's the best thing that you can do, I think, because that was so helpful. We had to just wait the whole weekend, and we only left our bed to go to the bathroom and to get food. Like the whole weekend was like, we just watched Netflix the whole weekend. I don't even know what we watched. I don't even think we cared what we watched. It was just so sad. And so like just something simple like not having to think about the food I was gonna eat, I could just pop something into the microwave, was so helpful. But I think the worst part of it was that weekend. And I told my friends, a couple of my friends later, that I felt like I was kind of trying to be polite and not tell everybody, that I just felt like I had my dead baby inside of me and there was nothing I could do about it. I couldn't do anything to make that not the reality. And so I felt like I couldn't even start my full healing process yet because it wasn't over. I still had to go have surgery Monday morning, which is scary in itself. I've never had surgery and been under general anesthesia. And especially the reason why this was happening, the reason why I was getting the surgery, it was a lot. So made it through the weekend. And Monday morning, we had to be at the hospital at like 5 a.m. and I had to get a COVID test. And I think my husband just had to get a temperature check at the hospital. And I was so thankful that he was able to come with me because there's no way I could have done that by myself. But that morning, I was actually okay. I wasn't emotional again. I felt like I was just really ready for it to all be over. I was just kind of eager for it to be done with. And so the nurses there were so unbelievably nice and helpful. They even made sure that I was like just comfortable. They got me a heated nightgown or a heated hospital gown, which I didn't know was a thing, but that was really cool because, hospitals are so cold and I'm always freezing. So that was really nice. Rounds of different doctors or groups came in to talk to me. So I had different nurses come in. I had the anesthesiology group come in, so the actual doctor, and then the CRNAs or the nurses with that group. And then my doctor came in and spoke with me and answered any last minute questions that we had. And they did ask us whether or not we wanted to send a sample to pathology, because that can kind of tell you, they can test and see if there was something wrong chromosomally, or sometimes they can figure out what went on. And at first I just said, no, I don't think we're interested, because my initial reaction was that it doesn't matter. It is what it is. It's already happened. Knowing why isn't going to change the situation. So I just thought, no, I want to close this chapter. But my husband was like, whoa, let's talk about this. And my doctor did explain that, a lot of times they can figure out what happened, and that brings closure. And so I'm so thankful that I reconsidered this and that we said yes and decided to do that testing, because we did end up figuring out what happened, and that honestly did give me a lot of closure. So it also brought me a lot more pain, which I'll get to in a minute, but it did ultimately give me the closure that I think I needed. So I got wheeled in for the procedure, and there was a whole team of doctors. I don't know what I thought I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting as many people to be in there that were. I think there were like maybe 7 or more people in there, all for me. The other thing that I wasn't expecting was that operating tables are super small. So they wheeled me in my hospital bed, and then the surface area that I was on, like I felt like I was gonna fall off, and I'm a pretty small person, so that was just kind of a random thing I thought was really weird. But anyways, I didn't get emotional at all that morning until right before I went under. One of the CRNAs came in and she grabbed my hand, and of course everybody's wearing masks, and she looked me directly in my eyes and she said, "I am so sorry that this is happening to you, but everything's gonna be okay." And I just, at that moment, I just started crying, because it's kind of like whenever you're fine until somebody asks if you're okay, and then that's when you lose it. That's kind of what that felt like. But it was like a few seconds later and I was completely out. And the next thing I know, I just woke up, and the first thing I said was, "I'm in pain." Like that was the first thing I thought coming to. And it was like a really intense cramp pain, like a dull pain, but very intense. So somebody came up and they're like, "Oh, I'm surprised you're already awake." So I guess I'd woken up pretty quickly, but they got me some pain medicine. They had also given me some pain medicine beforehand, I think to like kind of help. The procedure's only about 30 minutes. But obviously you don't even realize how much time goes by whenever you're asleep under anesthesia. So I was rolled back into, I think, the room that I started in, and my husband was there, which I was so thankful to see him. And I don't remember if they wanted me to use the bathroom or if I just had to go, but I did go to the bathroom and they let me go by myself. They just told me to be careful, don't stand up too quickly or whatever. And I did feel a little bit wobbly. Like I didn't feel like I was gonna fall, but I for sure felt a little bit weird walking and going to the bathroom. And somebody before I went into surgery actually told me that she was a nurse, and she came in and she was like, "Just so you know, I'm going to be getting you dressed," which I think was really great for her to come and tell me that, because when I went in, I was just in a hospital gown and that's it. And so if she hadn't have told me that, that could have been kind of alarming, waking up and having underwear on. So she did came in, like she told me that she was going to be doing that. So I was glad she did that. But so I went to the bathroom, and once I pulled my pants down, it was just like dripping blood, not gushing, but dripping. There was a lot of blood. And when I went to the bathroom, oh my goodness, it hurt so bad. It was burning. So this was one thing that they hadn't told me, which I really wish that they would, so that this wouldn't have been a surprise pain. But I guess I had a catheter in, and oh my gosh, it hurt that day, and it hurt for days after. It was very painful. And the other thing, I don't think that they really went over with me, or they didn't tell me like thoroughly. And since I'd never been under general anesthesia, I didn't really realize that I was going to be intubated, where they put a tube in your throat to help you breathe. Because oh my gosh, my throat hurt so bad. And later on when I looked at it, it was cut up inside. It was all bloody, like you could visibly see the cuts in my throat. So that's something to be prepared for if you have this done. But my doctor told me that she wanted to see me 2 weeks for a post-op checkup to make sure everything was healing properly, because you can get scarring from this procedure. I think that it's a really rare complication, but they are going in and scraping out your uterus. So that can happen, but I think it's more common if you have to repeat the procedure, like if they didn't get it all maybe. But signs of that would be if I got my next menstrual cycle and it was kind of irregular, that would be a sign that I might have scarring, and that can affect your fertility. But I went to my 2-week follow-up, and because this wasn't an ultrasound appointment, my husband wasn't allowed to come with me. So I had to go by myself, and they were expecting the pathology results to be available then, but when I went in, my doctor said that there was only a partial pathology report available. It wasn't fully back yet. But this was the news that totally broke me. For me, this was I think harder than even finding out I had a miscarriage, because it was like compounded pain. But what she said was that the preliminary pathology results looked like I had a molar pregnancy, which I had never heard of. So if you don't know what that is, because I didn't, it's whenever there's triploidy, or there's 3 sets of chromosomes instead of 2. So it's like XXX, XXY, XYY, something like that, or something went wrong and there's a whole extra set of chromosomes. And from my understanding, there's 2 types that you can have. There's either a complete molar pregnancy or a partial molar pregnancy. And I don't remember like all of the science behind it, but in a complete molar pregnancy, there will be no fetus present. I think there's a couple different ways that this can happen. Like if the egg for some reason had no genetic material, it might like copy to get the right number of chromosomes, and I don't know, I think that's what goes on. Or that 2 sperm can fertilize an egg. I might be getting that wrong. But anyways, in a partial molar pregnancy, there will be a fetus present. So that's what they were suspecting that I had, because there was definitely a fetus. We saw it. But the sinister part about this is that molar pregnancies can cause cancer in the mother. For whatever reason, that's what happens. And the marker for that cancer is HCG, which is the pregnancy hormone. So basically the way that they would test or monitor if you have that cancer is by the presence of that pregnancy hormone. So what my doctor told me is that they're likely gonna ask me to not get pregnant for a whole year, because if you are pregnant, they can't tell whether the HCG is from your pregnancy or whether it's because you're developing cancer. It kind of muddies the waters. And so she was saying that I was gonna have like frequent blood tests, like weekly or monthly, to make sure there was no HCG present. Like first to make sure all of my HCG was out of my system after my miscarriage, and then make sure that it didn't start rising back up, because that would be evidence of cancer. And that if that happened, I would have to go see an oncologist, and I would be probably having surgery again and treated for cancer. So that was obviously very scary, and it just felt cruel. It felt so cruel. Not only did I have a miscarriage and lose the baby that I thought we were gonna have to like make our little family, but also now I can't get pregnant for a whole year and I might have cancer. It was so like, it felt so sinister and evil. And I was all by myself at that appointment. And again, I held it together until I got in my car, and I just broke down. And I told my husband, like, I'll talk about it whenever I get home. Like, I didn't want to have that conversation on the phone because I knew I just couldn't handle it. I wanted to tell him in person. I live super close, so it's like a 5-minute drive from my house, from my doctor's office. So he was calling and calling and calling the whole way home, and finally he was like outside whenever I pulled up because he like knew something was wrong. And so I just broke down and cried, and I told him, and yeah, I just felt completely broken. But that day, my doctor didn't do the post-op exam, I think because she was giving me this news. She didn't want to have to be like prodding and poking around at me when I was probably going to be very upset. So she had me schedule another appointment 2 weeks later, which would have been 4 weeks or like a month after my operation. But yeah, for that 2 week period between those appointments, I was at such a low point, and like I still had work every day. I still had to cook and make dinner and do my life, and it had been long enough to where, you know, people were still checking in on me, but it wasn't, I mean, nothing would have made it better anyways. There's nothing anybody can say or do to make you feel better. I guess it's just good to know that you have people there if you need someone for anything. But whenever the next appointment was scheduled, I asked for a waiver to have my husband come with me because I just didn't want to do another one of those appointments alone. And I had just gotten bad news after bad news after bad news, and I just couldn't take any more of it by myself. So luckily they granted me that waiver for him to come with me. And when my doctor came in, she was like giddy. She was excited, and she was like, I have good news for you. And then she's like, well, wait, I think I have better news for you than you think I'm going to have. And she was like, you know what? Because she was kind of even stumbling over her words. She's like, you know what? Let me just tell you what I have to tell you. And she said that the full pathology report was back, and I did not actually have a molar pregnancy. And when she said that, it felt like time just paused. Like I just looked at my husband and looked at my doctor, and I was at a loss for words. I was like, really? What do you mean? And she said that it turns out that the baby did have trisomy 18, which she said is not compatible with life. And of course I did some Googling later, and I think that babies can be brought to term with this, but from my understanding, they don't live very long. That's what I found, at least. I'm not 100% sure about that, but that was when I got kind of the closure that I knew it was truly nothing I did. Of course they tell you that, and you try to like you push it out of your head, but in the back of your mind it's still kind of there, like, was there something I could have done differently? But no, there wasn't. This was just a random genetic mistake that just happens, just one of the mysteries of the universe. It just happens. But that also meant that I had no risk for cancer, and that I didn't have to have those constant blood tests for the next year. I didn't have to wait to try to get pregnant again, and I didn't have to keep thinking about it for the next year. Like that must be so hard. My heart really feels for people who have to go through that, and people who go through infertility and go through all those periods of waiting, because just even the thought of that was so hard for me to imagine. I'm just so sorry that happens to people. But we were obviously really relieved at the news, and I was so surprised because I was just expecting I was going to get more bad news. So of course it wasn't like good news that the baby had trisomy 18, but in light of everything that had happened, it actually was a relief to know that. So my doctor recommended that we wait 1 to 2 menstrual cycles until we started trying again. And luckily for me, I did get my cycle back pretty quickly. Honestly, I don't remember how long it took. I think maybe anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks after my operation, maybe a little bit longer. But I didn't have any scarring or anything like that. Whenever I did get my cycle back, everything was very normal. So I'm thankful for that. And this was the worst thing that's ever happened to me personally. like, this was personally the hardest thing I've ever gone through emotionally and maybe even physically. It was very, very difficult. And I think that it just brought me even closer with my husband and with my family and the people in my life. It really meant a lot that people rallied around us and supported us so much. But this is a terrible thing that people go through. And one of the things that I don't think people realize, and I haven't really heard anybody say this, but how I felt about it was people will say, oh, it's so early, as if it hasn't been that much time. But if you remember, we started planning this in January of 2020, and I had my miscarriage and surgery in August. So it was more than 8 months of me and my husband anticipating this and wanting this. And it was 3 months, basically almost 3 months of me being pregnant. I mean, that's 3 whole months of your life. Even if you find out you're pregnant and you have a miscarriage 1 day later, just the excitement of knowing that you're pregnant is just, you're on such a high and on cloud 9, and when you don't have that anymore, it's completely crushing. It's so crushing. And so that's one thing I think that people don't really realize, is that if you think about something every single day for 3 months, and then the worst possible thing happens, it's like, say you've been planning to see your family or like a loved one or somebody you really care about for 3 months, and every single day you're talking about it. Maybe you're gonna have this really exciting trip, and the time finally comes and you're so excited you're gonna get to see them, and in the car on the way over to you, they get in a car crash and die. That's what it's like. That's what it feels like. It feels like something you were so excited for and you already love, like you don't know it yet, but it's part of your reality, and then it just dies and it's gone. That's what it feels like. And I think that people don't really understand that unless you've gone through it, or you know someone really close who's gone through and you have an intimate experience with it. It's absolutely devastating, but you know, time is the great healer in my opinion. So time's been the best thing. I mean, this has been 3 months since this happened, and this is the first time I've cried about it in a couple of months. I think I cried every day for the first full week, and then I finally stopped crying about it every day. But little things would come up where I would think about it and I would cry again. But now I usually, making this video was an exception, but now I can usually talk about it without crying. But I know this was a long one. I just wanted to tell the full story and let you know that if you're going through this, I am so sorry that this is happening to you. I wish that there was something I could say or do to make it better, but I hope that maybe this video helped someone just hear somebody else's experience, or let you know what to expect, or help you to know how to support someone, or just understand and maybe empathize a little bit more by understanding how it feels, at least from my perspective. So thank you so much for watching. And I don't know, be a good human. Have a good day. Bye.